a company that is kind of the liaison between a buyer and an artist team. So I help people book, plan, and prepare large scale entertainment events normally. This year looks a little different because let's be honest, large scale events aren't necessarily happening. So we can get more into that later. But how I got here is I actually started going to school for theater and I wanted to be an actress. And within 2 weeks of acting class, I was like, nope, put me backstage. This vulnerability is a little bit much for me. And got really involved backstage, loved all of that. So I did stage management, I did like managing the box office, anything I could get my hands on basically backstage. I did a couple shows on stage. Again, wasn't necessarily my strength. So with that, I also was poor because I was a college student and I needed to make money. And I saw that there was an opening in the student activities office of my college, which was UW, University of Wisconsin-Stevens Point. The reason I chose that school is because they had the most competitive theater program in the state of Wisconsin. So that's why I ended up going there. But then within a couple weeks, I had my hands in a lot of different other activities and really, really needed a job. Went into the campus activities office and was like, oh, cool. They like book concerts and comedians and I love all of that. Cool. So I got the job and my job was to basically, they do not let students do this anymore, process all of the entertainment contracts coming through the university. And do all the edits on the contracts, give them back and forth to the agency. Again, I'm sure they don't let a student do this anymore.
They do not let us do this anymore.
I was also in charge of approving posters that were posted on campus. They had to have a certain criteria to be posted. So apparently I was this magic position that I guarantee you doesn't exist anymore, but I learned a ton. I learned what to look for on a contract, kind of geeked out on that, really got good at, editing contract language and digging through that and figuring out what it all means, decoding the lawyer speak. And that was a full-time job during the summer between my junior and senior year. And my boss caught me reading at my desk and said, "What am I paying you for?" And I said, "Give me more work to do. I'm bored." And he ended up saying, fine. So he hired me to he was in charge of a couple community entertainment series, like a lunchtime series downtown, and then a Friday night series in the band shell. And he's like, here's a whole bunch of submissions, like dig through all of this, make up a series, market it. Here's your thing. Okay. So I booked 2 different series and did everything start to finish, including laying the chords the night of the show, rolling chords and grabbing hospitality and all of that. So he kind of let me run with that. He was there, of course, but I pretty much ran 2 concert series because I got bored one day. Then he also hired me to be a runner, which is like running to go get beer for someone if they want it, or bring someone to a hotel, pick them up at the airport. They hired me as a runner and a hospitality coordinator for a couple different summer festivals as well, one of which the talent was booked by a middle buyer. One of the events was like for the local brewery and they paid me in beer. Some of them were not paid. Some of them were just for experience. And I just kept saying yes, ultimately, and loved it. Learned a ton. I have stories I could tell you about just like they had too many things, so I had to take a seat out of the van and leave it at the airport and then come back for it later. And luckily my van seat was still there, like every silly thing you can imagine. But I learned so much, especially about just how to talk to people on the road and kind of network with all of those folks. So at one of these events, I ended up sitting down randomly and talking to the middle agent that had booked the talent about what he does. And I didn't even know that was a job. You might not even know that what I do is a job right now, and that's okay. And it sounded really fun and it was really neat. And I talked to him for a long time at this event. Didn't think a whole lot about it after college. My first job out of college was actually at a performing arts center in Milwaukee. Whoever's from Milwaukee, it's the Sharon Lynn Wilson Center. You're from Milwaukee too?
Yeah.
Do you know them?
Oh,
Yeah, that was my first job out of college, and let me tell you how I got it. My last semester in college, I volunteered for the Association of Performing Arts Presenters in New York City. You can, if you volunteer as a student, or at least this used to be the way it was, you got to go for free if you put in some volunteer hours. So I went for free as a student. I had a friend that lived in New York City. Being a theater major, you kind of know people in New York City. Stayed with her and went to this conference. I thought, I'm going to go live in New York City and I'm going to be a big time agent and this is going to be my life. Well, within a week, spending a week in New York City made me realize I don't think this is home. This is a great place to visit, but I don't think this is home for me. Kind of discouraged, got to the airport. My flights were all canceled. So had a lot of time to kill in the airport, and I recognized some folks from Wisconsin sitting at the airport, walked up to them, introduced myself, talked to them for a while, and didn't think a whole lot about it until I applied for this job in Milwaukee because I knew I could live with my sister when I was flat broke leaving college. I think I graduated college with like I went to live with my sister with like $100 in my account. I was like, I can do it. I can go up from here. And lived with my sister. The reason they hired me at the Sharon Lynn Wilson Center is because I walked into the interview and guess who was there? It was all the people that I had talked to in the airport. They said that out of 150 applicants, they hired me because after 7 hours in an airport, I was still smiling, and that's who they wanted to deal with their artists. So you never know. Be nice. That's my number one piece of advice for any time you're going to network with people. You never know when they're going to come back into your life, so be nice. But anyway, I worked for them for a little over a year, and I was in a long-term relationship, and we were long distance. And he's like, I'm moving back home to Green Bay, Wisconsin. I said, where am I going to find a job in Green Bay, Wisconsin? The day he moved back, I got a call from this middle agent that I had that long conversation with in college that I kind of forgot about. He called me and he had an opening because somebody that had worked for him for 10 years was leaving. He needed somebody that could jump into that role. So I had been at the Wilson Center a little over a year doing artist coordination. Again, hospitality, running, booking their hotel rooms, making sure the production team in the back office had all the information, welcoming the artists when they walked in the door, like just kind of an event coordinator for the entertainers there. And also I was in charge of weddings. So I had to deal with brides. Brides' parents and tour managers that are crabby are not that different. So it was a good learning experience. But I got that call from the middle agent and I was looking for a move that's perfect. He was based in Green Bay. They needed somebody right when my lease was up because I had, by the way, moved out of my sister's apartment by then. Studio apartment. I moved up, right? And anyway, I interviewed with him and it was kind of the perfect fit. So he hired me and I became a middle agent for 8 years. I worked for that company. Loved it. Obviously grew a lot there. It was a family business, so the owners were in their 60s and they had hired their son who was around my age. So I felt like I was running a company that I was never going to run. So my husband had been trying to convince me, like, you can do this on your own, start your own company. And finally, I just kind of had like the straw that broke the camel's back. And I was like, you know what? I'm going to do it. And I walked out, started my own company, How To Concerts. It was really hard leaving a family business after 8 years. That was like breaking up with my own family. Like that was really hard. Probably the hardest thing I've had to do in my entire career. And started it with kind of this low expectations of I'm going to do whatever I can. Most people really enjoyed working with me. I worked with a lot of college campuses and then some theaters, arenas, festivals. A lot of the college campuses, most of my clients followed me because they just trusted me and they knew me as a person and they knew that no matter what did somebody say to me? They said, I don't care what company name is after your name. So it meant a lot. That was the most humbling experience ever as well, to start from here and then just go back down and start my own and build up again. So that's kind of how I became a middle agent and how I became an entrepreneur. And what's funny is that when my husband and I got married 10 years ago, I remember going to get life insurance, and the guy saying, well, if you ever like own a company or anything, and my husband and I were like, we're never going to own a company. What are you talking about? This is fine. And 10 years later, of course, we called him and we're like, well, we own a company. So we might have to fix this life insurance. So that's kind of the story of how I got here and how I became the owner of How To Concerts.
Amazing. If anyone ever has any questions, also it's like a small enough group of us, so you can always just unmute yourself and talk to the group. But I guess next we'll kind of look at like, what does your job look like now, and like what is your day-to-day, both like before the pandemic and then like now with this going on?
Right. So pre-pandemic, we had been building quite quickly. So 2 years ago, we hired our first staff member. Before that, it was my husband and I. He does freelance marketing and then does some of the business things behind the scenes because I don't want to run payroll. Not my strength. Know your strengths. I am a sales, event planning mindset and educational mindset. I don't do well when it comes to like managing the nuts and bolts of payroll and invoicing and that kind of stuff. So he was doing that in the background, freelance marketing, also had a part-time job. Eventually he got rid of the part-time job because the business was doing so well, and just kind of ran some of that stuff behind the scenes while I was running things. And the great part is we got too busy. So 2 years ago, we hired our first employee who was a former advisor at a campus. And what's funny is he had hired me to help with a show because he thought he was leaving his campus. And I really enjoyed working with one of his students. And she was from Wisconsin because I needed somebody that could live in our office for the first couple of years. There's so much learning to be had when you're, training an up and coming middle agent by listening into my phone conversations. That's how I learned. I sat on the floor of my boss's office listening to all of his conversations on how you word things and how you explain a production piece or like all that stuff. So I knew that there was value to that, and she was from Wisconsin. So I contacted him and I was like, hey, can we talk about your student? And I sent him the job description and he said, can I apply? And I said, yes. So he applied, and he felt very bad that it was between the two top candidates were him and his student. He felt so bad that once we hired him, he also got his student hired at a comedy club in Nashville. So turned out okay for her too. But that's the gist of kind of what our company looks like. But pre-pandemic, he was traveling a lot. I was traveling a lot. We go to quite a good chunk of our shows so that they go okay, and just kind of, if we're there and we look bored, that means that's great. That means everything's going well. If we are running around, that means there's some, coordination to be had, or an artist is missing, or whatever that looks like. It's kind of our job to help people deal with challenges as they come up. Oh, the flights are delayed. Okay, let's talk to the production company. Let's go talk to this person to see if we can stall here and get them in the building, and kind of coordinate those on the ground pieces. And then the rest of the time, it's all email and phone call, booking events, making offers, pushing contracts back and forth, advising on how to edit something out of a contract, getting marketing pieces and posters approved from the artist team, making recommendations, telling a school when somebody sucks to work with, kind of knowing the ins and outs of the industry, knowing who to talk to about what, making sure people are paying fair prices. The hard part about colleges is that sometimes colleges are known as having these big, huge budgets because you're based in the Midwest, but there's a lot of schools on the East Coast. these big Ivy League schools that have a ton of money to burn. They want the artist they want. They don't care what it costs to get that artist, and they'll pay it. Now, the rest of us in the rest of the country are trying to, constantly figure out, okay, what is their real value if you're paying a flat guarantee? Or can I offer less and maybe offer bonuses or a percentage? Going through budgets, just basically walking a school or a festival or a team, a private event through the planning process for a large scale event. Normally that means how many months of planning, right? In spring, it was like everybody lit their hair on fire and ran around canceling events because nobody knew what to do. There had never been a global pandemic. It was so stressful. I was on the phone 15 hours a day watching my livelihood, all of our, potential revenue, because we don't get paid till a show happens. Watching it all like disappear, trying to figure out if we could salvage some service fees or something. I burst my eardrum from stress. In the middle of the night, I woke up and my eardrum burst. So that was fun to take 15 hours a day of phone calls with one ear. And basically my job at that point became talking somebody through what a cancellation looks like, reading them their force majeure language, talking about what are the protections here, basically calling the artist teams and saying, this is all going down, folks. You need to have a plan because I'm going to keep calling you every day with new cancellations, and you cannot threaten to sue me every single day. It's not going to work. So all of that was quite interesting. We thought we'd be out of it, right, by summer, and we could reschedule everything for fall. So some of it was rescheduling the dates. Obviously, we're at a different point. So now my day-to-day looks like this. My day-to-day looks like teaching either a college campus or a corporate buyer or whomever how to run a Zoom. What does it look like to stream onto Zoom, onto Twitch, onto YouTube, how to not get shut down by YouTube, all of that. And then turn around and talk to the artist team and figure out if they know what the heck they're doing, because 70% of them don't. And I've never had to tell a production manager how to do their job. So now my job also entails telling a production manager how to do a virtual show and how to effectively, make the audio come through and not have a lag, and all the different nuances of the different technologies, getting them the links and the stream keys and all the things, coordinating sound checks. Right now on the computer next to me, right here, sometimes I have 4 screens going with different events, trying to like help out where I can. Other times there's an event going and there's nothing I can do about something weird happening. The other day on a live stream, I had an artist eat a cheeseburger midstream. Super fun, right? Nothing I could do about it. So this is me. Why? So that's what my life looks like a little bit right now. But that's kind of what, COVID times look like, is trying to teach everybody all this new technology. Again, make sure that the pricing is fair when nobody knows how to price for a virtual event. All of that, just kind of walking people through the process, learning as I go, and then teaching others quickly what I've learned, because I might have just learned something this week, but I'm going to use that knowledge to teach other people so we can all get better at this, right? So we can all stay in business, we can all keep people engaged, all of that. So that's kind of what my day-to-day looks like. But I do a lot of Zoom, I do a lot of emailing, a lot of phone calls, a lot of technology, watching events at night.
All of us, I'm sure, are very familiar with the amount of technology that is going on. Yeah, thank you. I guess another question I saw from the RSVP when there was a space to like ask questions was, some people were interested if you had any advice for like college students specifically about like majors or things like that for interest in the music industry. And I can assist with that because I know a lot of the majors at the U. So if there's not a specific word, I can try to help as best as I can.
What is your major, Emily?
I'm a strategic communications major and a history major.
Okay.
So I haven't picked my focus yet, but it'll most likely be public relations or advertising. So
in general, the people I know across the entire music industry, it does not seem to matter as much what your major is. It matters more what you've done with that or what you've done on the side. So, marketing is actually good. Marketing and communication and business are honestly some of the best um, sort of majors. I mean, there's like 15 different majors in marketing, right? And like there's so many different subsets of that. But anything that's going to get you skills in those areas is going to be beneficial to you. But ultimately, it comes down to your experience, who you know, your ability to network. And that doesn't mean you have to be like a really extroverted person. I know plenty of people in the industry that are pretty introverted, but just communicate effectively and efficiently. And sometimes that's almost better than like somebody who's too too extroverted. But it's really comes down to what you do with that and how you present yourself and how you use connections to get information and to get to the next point. I remember one time I was talking to somebody who used to be in charge of contracts at one of the biggest agencies. And I'm like, how do you always stay so calm when we're like fighting about contract points? And she said, it's fine. I deal with apes on the weekends. I was like, excuse me? She's like, no, I'm a primatologist. So her job, because she needed a daytime job, like apparently on the weekends, she's a primatology at a zoo, or she was, this was years ago. She she saw like an ad somewhere about looking for like help at an agency, went into the interview, noticed a spelling or a grammar error on something hanging on their wall, and they're like, hired. Because she was so attention to detail, and that's who they wanted to hire to go through their contracts. So it's like all of those moments where it's something you say that you don't even know is effective, and it's that ability to kind of network and present yourself well.
Yeah. And then I guess like another question related to that, is there any like just that you've seen like any classes that cover specific things that would be like really beneficial to have? Because like I know at the U we have just like an introduction to like American law class that goes over like all the different I haven't taken it, but like so there's classes like that. Would you recommend anything along those?
I might have taken one of those and I don't remember it, to be honest. I got
Yeah.
much more experience actually going through the contracts on campus and,
Mhm.
sitting down with my boss and saying, well, why am I crossing this out? But I think everybody needs marketing. Anything you can do to gain experience in marketing, business relations, business ideas is going to help you, and sales.
Mhm.
No matter what you're doing in the entertainment industry, I feel like there's sales and marketing involved. So if you're an artist, you're always going to need to know how to sell your product, right? Your music. Because when you're just starting out, you don't have a whole team. You need to know how to get your word out there and present a good product, right? And
Yeah.
that's what sales is. Being good on stage and charismatic on stage and getting the crowd to, you know, sing back with you, that's all sales. That's all sales and marketing, and that's creating that environment to for so people have a really fun time. Same thing goes with if you work for an agency or a management company or in marketing itself or the label. All of that is marketing and sales. So, the silliest thing is like I was also a waitress, throughout how many years of my life. Waitressing is also marketing and sales, right? Like, give people a good time and be charismatic, and you get a lot of tips. So, like, it kind of being an engaging personality it's all the same stuff. It's all sales and marketing. And honestly, when we come out of all of this, sales and marketing is just going to keep being more important because it's changing. And you are lucky enough to be young enough that you can learn so much coming out of this because of what you saw as people went through it and what worked on you in a time of like craziness. Like, what made you want to come to this tonight? What made you want to go to a different virtual stream? What was it about that sales or marketing that you were like, I'm going? Because
Yeah.
that's what companies are going to be looking for when they start hiring again.
Yeah. Were you in any clubs or like did you do any extracurriculars that you think like benefit you now?
way too many. So arts management was a major. So halfway through college, uh, I had like a theater degree, and I told them kind of what I was interested in. I was like, I think I want to go into the entertainment industry somehow. And my academic advisor was like, well, we have a major for that here. It's called arts management. Sign me up. So I ended up getting a double major in arts management and theater. But again, I learned a lot, but the majority of what helps me today are the things I learned outside of the classroom. I think the classroom, like, get your degree, right? Like, people look at a resume, they want to know you have your degree, that you stayed in school, you stuck with it, and you got your degree in something. But then they're going to look at your experiences and what you were involved with. So you talked about clubs. I was involved with, obviously the theater department because you had requirements if you were going to be a theater major. I also had that job in the campus activities office. And once I listed out the crazy things I was in charge of there, that's, impressive in and of itself. And then the series that I got to put together myself and just describing what I did for those. Is there a series in your town? Is there a lunchtime series? Is there a club series? Is there a local club that you could work the door? Could you work security? Could you work the ticket office? Could you do some marketing flyering for them? All of that is stuff you can add to your resume, even though it seems like, ugh, like grunt work. You don't know who you're going to meet. You don't know who you're going to meet doing some of those things. Like maybe at one point you're there for a while and somebody's like, hey, we need somebody extra on the merch table. Can you sell merch? And lo and behold, now you're sitting next to the merch person of a tour, who, by the way, is they're looking for an assistant tour manager. Like, that's how all those connections kind of happen. So putting yourself out there and volunteering and saying yes to those additional opportunities are what makes the difference.
Yeah. Does anyone have any questions so far as we keep going with this? I don't want to like monopolize the discussion, so feel free to interrupt us. It's all good. I guess another thing that like I know I've had interest in is it's very difficult to like navigate the different facets of the music industry. It's like not easy to understand. So like, for example, I just learned like what A&R was a couple weeks ago. And like, so do you have any like tips for getting like a good base knowledge and like stuff like that? Or like, even if you could explain some things, because I know I'm speaking for myself, but like, it's very difficult to like understand what's going on out there and like how many different kinds of jobs there really are.
Yeah, honestly, have a couple key websites and news sources in the industry that you watch regularly. So, because I work with so many colleges, for instance, like right now, Inside Higher Ed is a good source for information, even for what the college trends as they're changing. That's my clientele. On the industry side, I get Polestar magazine. I'm checking the charts constantly. Hits Daily Double, everywhere. That's like media-based charts, like radio-based charts, streaming, all of that. Billboard is another good source, and social media. I know that social media is like, is it credible? Is it not? But again, like, who's posting it? Is it valid? Do your research. But trends are living on social media because that's where the young fans are. Jason Derulo, how did he get his most recent song is the biggest song he's ever had because of TikTok. Because it was a killer TikTok dance, right?
Craziness.
Yeah, but that's all trending. That's all stuff you gotta kind of follow and know about so that you can talk the talk when you meet those people.
Yeah.
And guess what? I have another secret for you.
Okay.
If you don't know something, fake it till you make it.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, smile and nod a lot and then Google it later.
Mm-hmm. Sounds about right. That's how I'm getting through college right now too. Another thing, I dropped it in the chat very early on, but for students, my team that I work with, we're working on creating like a music industry guide where like so far it only has like different Instagram accounts that are really good to follow, different like networking events, and it's very much a working document. So you might go there now and be like, this is very lame. I'm not going to look at this again. But it will be getting updated as we go through these events this semester. I'm not sure how much you guys know about this like job series, but we're doing one every month for first semester. So we're doing 4 of them in total. We'll be releasing more about the next one next month, but that's something to like follow if you're interested, is like keeping that document saved. I don't know if I have to give you guys access, but I will try to make sure that's fixed. And then another thing, I'll add this now, just before anyone leaves, there's a recap form that I'm going to put in the chat. Not saying we have to end this at all, but just before you leave, before you duck out, if you could fill that out, that'd be awesome. Does anyone have questions about anything?
Yeah, I have a question. So I know I'm interested in the entertainment industry, but I'm not particularly sure like what area. But one of them I'm considering is like music journalism. And I mean, I don't know if you know much about that, but I was just wondering if you had any like tips.
So honestly, no matter what area you're interested in, the best thing to do for the entire industry is to become well-rounded, right? So, yes, you should be like reading everything, but also surround yourself with what you're going to be writing about as much as you possibly can, so that when you're writing from a place of like educated about the subject, and start a blog, so that you can practice. And again, this is where it comes down to marketing. That's something you can put out there so that people kind of hear about you, and reach out to some local sources, local news sources, to put yourself out there and say, hey, I have a blog. Like, is there any way we could do a co-written story, or, co-write something with somebody else that you want to interview artists? That, I hate to use a name drop, but that's a way to kind of bring attention to that writing.
Yeah.
So, those are a couple things, but keep being well-rounded. Like, you talked about classes, by the way. One of the silliest classes that I didn't think was going to come in useful for me in college, that comes in useful all the time, even though the technology has changed, was my like intro to theater production class, because I got to learn how to like program a lighting design in like such a simple way, because it was an intro class, but it made me understand, what those people are doing when they're running the consoles, right? Like, I know exactly what they're doing, and I can kind of, again, you can talk the talk. So some of that just gives you more access to people, because you mention a word and they're like, oh, you know things. I can talk tech with you. Sometimes you got to run away from those conversations if you don't know enough, but at least you faked it enough to get into the conversation. So such a random class that really came in handy for me. But those are some of the things you could do, and just keep networking, because somebody will say, oh, I need somebody to write something. Oh, I think Sarah writes, right? Yeah, let me call Sarah.
Yeah. Thank you.
And say yes.
Mhm.
Say yes to opportunities. Obviously, don't get taken advantage of, but as much in your younger years as you can say yes to things. And let's address the elephant in the room. Like, right now, it is really hard to be motivated, right? Like, what does even the next 6 months look like, much less a year from now when you're job searching or whatever? Nobody knows. So it's very hard to stay motivated. And like, there's not a ton of live shows that you can go volunteer for. There's just a lot. Feels like everybody's lives are on hold. So whatever you can do in this time to stay motivated, obviously give yourself a break, obviously recharge in whatever ways you can. But even like this stuff, the fact that you're all here and you're participating tonight is a win, because you're doing it. Like, you're doing something to advance that dream, to advance that goal, which is hard right now. But honestly, go to the live streams. They're kind of soul sucking sometimes, but go to them so that you can kind of observe them and learn, and say, what would make this better is this, and be thinking about that, because that's how we're all going to have to advance, is how to make all of this better. We might be doing this for a while.
Yeah. I'm trying to think. I guess for like there's a very unique like internship culture at the University of Minnesota. I'm sure it's like this at every college where there's this kind of expectation, and I don't know if it's more in my major, but like there's a lot of expectations about getting internships. And I guess like, do you have any advice specifically for music related stuff, or as well as like, are there any like, if you saw X internship on a resume and it wasn't music related, would there be anything that like would turn your eye or something like that?
What gets my attention is anybody that clearly is working hard, right? So when I can see that there's been like a lot of different varied things happening and listed. Like my employee, honestly, his background before he started his job in higher ed was in rec, like campus rec.
Yeah.
He was like a lacrosse player that got involved in campus rec. So it's not like he was a student that was super into going to shows. Like he kind of started a little bit later than that and then got really into it, obviously. But but before that, he had other things going on. So I think that I got to go back to the question. Can you say the question one more time?
Yeah, the question was very long and probably had many other questions built within that. But like, do
I
you have
lost my
advice for people that are interested in working in the music industry? So like potential music industry internships, like do you have advice for people
internships.
seeking that out? Yeah, that was kind of the first chunk.
So I had to do a couple of internships as an arts major or arts management major, and those were varied. And honestly, I just convinced my advisor to count some of my theater stuff as internships and my job as an internship. And I just kind of figured out how to make money while also calling it an internship. It was industry experience. So
Yeah.
I convinced them that, hey, I might be getting paid, but it's internship. And then at the end of the arts management major for us, we were supposed to do a 3-month externship. So I just applied for that theater job and I convinced them to, my first 3 months of my job, they paid me less and it was my externship. And then as the end of 3 months, that's when my benefits kicked in. And that's when it became a full-time job and they raised my salary. So it worked out because I just wanted to get out there. I had a job opportunity. I wanted to take it. So everybody was okay with that. A whole bunch of people had to sign off on it. Again, I don't know if they let people do this anymore, but it worked. And then we actually have an intern right now, and which is really funny because we can't afford to hire, right? Like nobody in the industry can. He came to us and said, I will make up my internship description. Like all I want to do is learn. Anything you can teach me is going to be better than me sitting in my room doing nothing. So with law, with the way that like labor works, an internship is supposed to either count for credit or be paid or like be on your transcript as a 0 credit internship. Like there's certain qualifications you're supposed to meet, or it has to be more beneficial for the intern. And this could be just Wisconsin law, by the way, so you'd have to look into it. But it has to be more beneficial for the intern than for the company that's like having the intern. So we had him come up with the things he wanted to learn and how he could benefit the most from this internship so that he was the one benefiting more than us. And then we would give him opportunities that matched that request. I was like really super impressed with his initiative. Like we weren't even looking for an intern and he convinced us to have one. So who can you call and convince to let you help?
Yeah. Have you ever because as a communications major, there's this huge, like, got to keep networking. You have to be networking all the time. Has it ever been off-putting for you to have someone come and attempt to network or like ask something like that? Because I always feel when I'm like trying to network that I'm going to be like annoying someone or like bothersome.
Nope. And if they're not nice to you, they're not very smart. Because here's why. Someday, when you're a big executive at an agency and I need a job, and I come to you and you remember me and the fact that I helped you out and gave you some advice, guess what?
Yeah.
You might hire me. So everybody has to think of it that way, right? There's no rules anymore about when you get older, you just go up the totem pole. It doesn't work that way anymore. So we all have to kind of network with each other and just expect, like, you never know when you're going to run into someone again. So that's, again, just like when I ran into people in the airport, you never know when somebody's going to be in your next job interview, or you're going to need some kind of networking resource. Like, maybe if you're not the exec, do you work there and you can get me a foot in the door? All of that is kind of how that network works. So never discount anybody because of, age, race, anything. Somebody that doesn't seem connected or whatever, you never know when that person's going to come back into your life.
Yeah. Does anyone else have any other questions?
I have one.
Yeah.
So when you are looking for artists and stuff like that, is it really kind of just like you work with like labels and stuff like that, or do you work with more like independent artists, or like how do you look for them? I know you talked about like the Billboard charting and stuff like that, but for like someone that's like independent and more of like, you know, first getting their foot in the door, like is that even an option that you deal with them, or how does that work?
So I'm a buyer's agent. So I represent the buyer in this deal. So if they're interested in somebody, I will track them down, whether they are independently represented, they are the neighbor down the street, or they are represented by a major agency. However, I get in touch with them. That's my job, is to go get that talent that they're looking for. If I was an agent, like if you are looking to get to the point where you're so busy that you need an agent, if I was an agent, I would be looking for talent that is selling tickets and that is so busy that them booking their own shows and doing their own work is preventing them from honing their craft and growing their music career. So that's when like representation makes sense. So like I remember we were at the past employer that I worked for, we didn't take on any artists that couldn't sell at least 100 tickets in 5 markets. It was a random number, and I don't know if anybody lives by that anymore, but we were representing some smaller regional acts that you would probably recognize from Milwaukee. I think we were representing the Guffs at the time. Yeah, and some others. And that's what we looked for. If you could sell 100 tickets in at least 5 markets and show me that you could do that, then we would be interested and we'd be talking about it.
Oh, here, Colin, you can finish your question.
No, I think then the other thing would be like, as an artist, and I know that this is kind of like not really in your lane, but how would you recommend? And I know a lot of it comes down to just like working on your craft and stuff, but how do you get in front of those people before? Sorry, sorry.
You're okay.
Um, sorry,
There,
there was just someone who I don't know if you heard that.
where are you right now? Are you in a studio?
Yeah, and then there's like a hidden studio inside one of the buildings. So yeah. But yeah, so as I think as an artist, just kind of getting to that level, and I know it all I mean, especially now, it's all about like, what you put out online and stuff like that. And I know there's all those trends and everything, but I think something that would be like consistent to eventually get recognized on a bigger level, like what, I don't know.
You have to play over and over and over again. That's the only way you're going to get better. And whether that's in front of people or online, right now it's online. But putting as much content out there and playing and playing and playing. Like there's a book that talks about the Beatles. The reason they got so good is because they played like 9-hour gigs, over and over again, and they found what got the crowd excited, right? Like they played 9 hours straight at some of these things when they were probably being paid nothing, right? But how do you not get better when you're playing 9 hours a day at a gig, right? So you just have to keep honing your craft and doing it over and over and over again, and you will get better. Like it's just like when you're building muscles, you gotta work out over and over again to build those muscles, and eventually that stuff happens. So you build muscle. You're gonna build that skill and know what's catchy. And when you post a video online, what gets more likes, gets more reaction. Right now you can kind of experiment a lot with what gets people excited online. They don't have anything better to do than look at your video.
I guess another aspect to that is, do you mind like explaining the difference between like, so you're a middle agent or a middle buyer, the difference between being like an agent and then like a booking agent? There's a lot of agent being thrown around. I was just curious if you could go over that.
Yeah, so I am a middle agent, which means that I represent and get paid by buyers. Like I'm a buyer's agent. Every artist or a lot of artists have an agent which represents them. They always have their artist's best interest in mind, whatever that might be. My job is to have the buyer's interests in mind. So again, when everything canceled, it was my job to talk to someone who was watching their artist's livelihood get taken away. And I had to defend the people that were trying to keep everybody safe. But I maintained like my job is to represent the buyer and their best interest. And their best interest is not to get a bunch of people on their campus sick, right? Like eventually within a couple weeks, everybody was canceling and nobody was screaming anymore. We were all just dealing with it. But at first they were like, absolutely not. We're going to sue because that's our job to represent our artist. So an artist agent is there to represent them, to have their best interest in mind, to make them money. There's so many artists that love performing, and Colin can probably attest to this. You want to hire an artist to play in your garage, they would probably do it if you talk to them directly, but there's agents to make them money, right? Like there's agents to make sure that they are getting paid for their work once they get to a certain level. A manager is somebody who manages the business aspects, manages the business and has their like direct career path in mind, whether it makes them a whole bunch of money or not. Obviously that's a goal, but it's more what's the right move for their career goal. And then like a publicist, their job is to get this music in front of people and in as many hands as possible for the financial gain and for the trajectory, right? To keep the trajectory going. So that's kind of like a real basic look at what an artist's team is that's working on booking and producing their live shows.
Perfect. And then I have one last fun question before we all say goodbye and go watch the presidential debate. So if anyone else has any like final questions before we end this, take it away. And then please fill out the recap form before you leave, or like you can leave and fill it out. And just for your information, the next event for these, we haven't released like who is going to be speaking yet, but it is going to be Tuesday, October 26th at 7:30 again. So if you're interested, it's going to be someone from a different facet of the music industry. And yeah, we're going to be doing a couple more of these later in each month. So yeah, thanks for coming. And then if anyone has any final thoughts, questions, take it away.